Hello viewers, welcome back to TV Education Timor. Here again with me, Dirce Lilifania in the Voice of America News. We announce VOA through the TV Education Timor, which cooperate with the Voice of America. I will accompany all of you in a few hours with many kind of information which will provide you to the real news in which is taken factually and actually in Internasional. Well, let's begin the news for today. Through his first 100 days in office, United States President Joe Biden has preserved many key aspects of his predecessor Donald Trump through approach towards China. Bill Gallo reports from VOA News.
In his first speech to Congress, U.S. President Joe Biden mentioned one country more than all the others, China. Biden explicitly declared the U.S. is in a competition with China to win the 21st century, issuing a warning to its president, Xi Jinping.
I told him, we welcome the competition. We're not looking for conflict. But I made absolutely clear that we will defend America's interest across the board.
Under Biden, U.S. officials have confronted China over its military intimidation of its neighbors, controversial trade practices, and human rights abuses. In many ways, it's a continuation of Trump's approach, which led to the worst U.S.-China ties in decades. One big difference is that Biden has tried harder to get U.S. allies to join the cause. He recently held the first leaders' summit of an informal alliance the U.S. hopes can counter China. Even in that group, though, many are reluctant to directly confront Beijing. And some U.S. allies remain unsure about political turbulence in Washington, says analyst Robert Kelly.
I think a lot of them just took a wait-and-see approach to see if Trump was, a really permanent, sort of populist turn in American life or a one-off thing, and Trump lost.
Good to be back.
In a speech Wednesday, Biden said America is not only back, but is here to stay. Despite Biden's assurances, however, some allies aren't convinced the U.S. has fully put its America First ideals behind it, says South Korea-based Professor Park Won-gon.
South Korea and other U.S. allies, especially liberal democratic countries, we have to prepare for this changing the world order. That means we are living in the decline of the U.S. power, and how do we restore this kind of world order, and at the same time, how can we design the post-American order? So that's the important question to the U.S. allies.
It's an issue at the top of Biden's agenda for Asia and elsewhere. How to convince the world that America is predictable again. Bill Gallo, VOA News, Seoul.
It's been a tense few days in Jerusalem and along the border between Israel and the Gaza Strip. Linda Grastain for VOA News.
The clashes in East Jerusalem happened in the evenings after worshippers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in the Old City broke their Ramadan fast. They were protesting police barricades that made it impossible for them to congregate at the Damascus Gate.
Palestinians, when they go to the evening prayers in Al-Aqsa Mosque, they like to rest in this area afterwards on these stairs. But the occupation doesn't like the presence of Palestinians in this area. It is a matter of sovereignty.
Israeli forces have since removed those barricades, which Palestinians celebrated as a victory. At the same time, Gaza Palestinians fired dozens of rockets at southern Israel, sending Israelis running to their bomb shelters. Israel launched airstrikes in response and warned of a larger, broader response if the rocket fire continues.
Israel has a lot of things that can do and even use kind of escalation. I'm not speaking about a full-scale escalation, but limited escalation to attack sensitive targets of Hamas inside Gaza, that we didn't do it until now.
Some analysts blame Hamas for provoking the tensions in Jerusalem and Gaza as part of a strategy to raise their profile in advance of next month's Palestinian elections.
Hamas is looking for a pretext to heighten tensions because they want to be seen on the Palestinian street as the champion of Palestinian interests, especially related to Jerusalem and especially during Ramadan.
Some more moderate Palestinians dream of a different Jerusalem.
I feel very sad about what's happening because I feel that this is not my Jerusalem. My Jerusalem is the city of peace, city of tolerance, city of acceptance, city in which the three Abrahamic faiths attached to Jerusalem respect each other, acknowledge each other, and live together.
But for now, that vision of peace is still only a dream. Linda Gradstein for VOA News, Jerusalem.
Foreign Minister of the G7 group industrialized nations are meeting in London this week with climate change, Russia and China among the topics up for discussion. Henry Richel reports from London.
Face to face for the first time in 2 years, G7 foreign ministers remained socially distanced as they met in London Tuesday. There is a full agenda for the two-day summit, including the G7's relations with Russia, which was ejected from the group after its forceful annexation of Crimea in 2014. G7 ministers condemned Moscow's recent deployment of troops on Ukraine's border.
If Russia chooses to act recklessly or aggressively, we'll respond. But we're not looking to escalate. We would prefer to have a more stable, more predictable relationship.
China is also high on the agenda.
It is not our purpose to try to contain China or to hold China down. What we are trying to do is to uphold the international rules-based order.
Chinese state media accused the United States Tuesday of, in its words, deliberately hyping up the so-called China threat. The G7 is upholding the principles enshrined at its foundation in 1975, says analyst John Curtin.
To protect within its own members and promote globally the values of open democracy and individual liberty. They were very much threatened by an expanding Russia above all in 1975. And they're still threatened by Russia today, but also China and other authoritarian regimes.
Britain also invited foreign ministers from Australia, India, South Africa and South Korea to the talks, a demonstration of London's focus on the Indo-Pacific region.
So what we are seeing is the birth of a broader democratic family. And if they're willing to put their country's name on paper alongside the Democratic Seven, the G7 itself, that will be an even more powerful signal.
G7 foreign ministers also discussed a coordinated response to the military coup in Myanmar and the violent crackdown on pro-democracy protests, and the US and NATO pullout from Afghanistan, which began this month.
Making sure that we preserve the ability to deal with counterterrorism, that the gains that were hard won in Afghanistan are not lost, and also ultimately promoting dialogue and a peace process that benefits all Afghans.
Meanwhile, campaigners are calling on the G7 to ensure that poorer countries get access to coronavirus vaccines. The United Nations says close to 90% of all vaccines administered worldwide have gone to richer nations. The response to the pandemic will be a focus when Britain hosts the G7 Leaders Summit in June, set to be Joe Biden's first overseas visit as US President. Henry Richwell for VOA News, London.
As India feels from a second wave of COVID-19 infection that is devastating major city, stockpiles are falling short of surging demands in the country, health expert warn. I'm Jana Pasricha for VOA News.
This is the most coveted jab in India as it reels under a ferocious second wave of the novel coronavirus pandemic. But although the inoculation drive for COVID-19 has been expanded to all above 18 years of age, vaccine shortages are hobbling the program.
The situation is extremely grim. I mean, of course, there aren't any words that can explain the situation is extremely grim. The system is at a brink of collapse, and that's the reason why we try to get vaccinated as early as possible.
But some states say they cannot cover the 18-plus age group. They are even turning away older people as vaccine stockpiles fall short of demand. India, the world's largest vaccine producer, was relying on domestically produced doses. But the approximately 70 million shots being produced a month cannot cater to its massive needs.
And if you take the 18 to 44 age group, who are the new entrants into the program, we are talking about 595 million people. So we are talking about 1.2 billion doses, right? Because everybody requires 2 doses of the vaccine. So in a sense, it's a huge ask. And our vaccine stocks currently do not measure up anywhere near that.
The government has stepped up efforts to get vaccines from overseas. Sputnik 5 doses arrived from Russia this week. Efforts are also on to accelerate domestic manufacturing, but it could take months to plug the shortfalls. Experts say India failed to stockpile enough vaccines as it prematurely declared victory against the pandemic during a lull in infections. It sent about 65 million doses to other countries as part of a vaccine diplomacy push.
I think it was sort of factored in their minds that we will not have to deal with the second wave, and therefore we could have a fairly measured, steady, graduated vaccination program which can flow in steps. And that is why we even felt we had the luxury of sending vaccines abroad to about 80 countries.
The sluggish rollout meant the country was largely unprotected when the second wave struck. About 2% of the population has been fully inoculated, while around 10% have received 1 dose. Now, fear overhangs the worst-hit cities like New Delhi, where hospitals and crematoriums are overwhelmed.
I deleted the social media apps for about a week in the middle because I just couldn't take it. Every time you open Twitter and everything, it's full of that. But then I had to get back because I realized that a lot of people are, seeking help on that platform. And if I could be of any help, then I need to be available. So it's very anxious. I mean, the times are very anxious.
That anxiety will remain in a country waging an ongoing battle for hospital beds, drugs and oxygen. Anjana Pasricha for VOA News, Mumbai.
The Indian diaspora living in the United States is watching in horror as India battles a devastating surge of COVID-19.
For Indians living in America, the daily crush of dark news from the homeland is a reminder that the pandemic is far from over. Virginia resident Varsha Mehta.
It's heartbreaking. They don't have beds. People are laying. There is 4,000 people are dying every day, and it's a unbelievable situation.
Indian Americans say the world's largest democracy was not adequately prepared.
India's infrastructure is just not built to handle something like this, just given overcrowding and the amount of people crammed into just small spaces at all times. And I think once the first wave kind of settled down, it was, like across the world, it was this sense of, okay, back to normal. But everybody experienced the second wave in some sense, and it's just hitting India a lot harder.
I definitely have elders in my family who've gotten vaccinated or at least gotten first dose, but you can definitely tell that they hasn't been efficient enough, and you could say that that's the fault of the government probably, to not, be devoted to committing and getting the resources that they need before, lifting all these restrictions and saying that, COVID is not in India right now. It'll be fine.
With over 20.2 million cases, India has the second highest number of COVID-19 infections behind the United States and the third highest number of deaths behind the US and Brazil. Tuesday, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki told reporters the United States is continuing to send aid to the hard-hit South Asian nation.
6 air shipments funded by USAID have departed the United States, 5 of which have already arrived in India. These flights include health supplies, oxygen supplies, N95 masks, rapid diagnostic tests, and medicine. And these are a lot of the components that the Indian government has expressed a vital need for. More flights are on the way, with total assistance expected to exceed $100 million.
But for many, the aid may be too late. Michigan resident Kalpana Bakad notes the impact on her family in India.
I have lost an aunt. I have lost a sister-in-law to COVID. And we have had many members of our family who have, who have been impacted by COVID, and they have recovered, luckily, but it's real.
The Indian diaspora in the U.S. is doing its part to raise money and help ease the suffering of so many. Indian American Chandru Asharia of Michigan.
This is one time that the entire Indian American community has come together and is pouring, the kind of support that you see for the situation back in India is extraordinary.
For the more than 4 million people of Indian descent in the U.S., a dichotomy of sorts as vaccinations increase in the U.S. and the pandemic rages on an ocean away. Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
Well, viewers, that's all the news for today. For more information, please call us on number below. I'm Dirce Lilifania and all crew of VOA and TV Education Timor. We would like to say thank you so much for watching. Have a great day and see you all next time. TV Education Timor is the future inspiration.
Acompanhe a reportagem nacional TVE. Na kuno informação atual, factual com a política, defesa, segurança, economia, social e educação. Iha kalan tuku hitu oras Timor-Leste, no repetição iha tuku stanulu oras Timor-Leste. Iha dader tuku hitu oras Timor-Leste, repetição iha tuku stanulu rasin rua 5 minuto tolonulu oras Timor-Leste. Acompanhamos a reportagem internacional, desporto nacional no internacional. Televisão Educação Timor, sem inspiração, ba futuro.
Playlist. A mim se apresenta TVE-T, música, videoclip com título Oi Oi. Espera, se anima TVE-T e a tempo serviço no descansa. Playlist e a canal TVE.